The airport buzzed with noise and activity, a symphony of hurried footsteps, boarding calls, and the hum of rolling suitcases. The air felt heavy, as if every traveler carried the weight of something unseen: stress, excitement, or just the exhaustion of trying to be somewhere on time. Amidst this chaos stood Malik Johnson. 10 years old, scrawny, and wide-eyed, he clutched his mother's hand tightly. His oversized backpack hung low, the straps nearly slipping off his narrow shoulders. They had arrived hours earlier than their flight, much to Malik's annoyance. But his mother, Lila Johnson, didn't like risks. "We're flying to a funeral, Malik," she reminded him sternly. "This isn't a vacation." Malik didn't respond. He kicked at the scuffed linoleum floor and stared blankly at the gate screen. His grandmother, his mother's mother, had passed away unexpectedly. Malik barely knew her, but seeing his mother cry these past few days had left an ache in his chest. While Lila settled in a nearby chair, busying herself with her phone, Malik's gaze wandered across the terminal. He noticed a woman, old, frail-looking, and bent slightly over a large suitcase. Her thin hands struggled to lift it onto a luggage cart. The more she tried, the more hopeless the task seemed. Passengers passed by her as if she were invisible. They were too caught up in their own rush to stop. Malik tilted his head. His mother had always taught him about kindness. Even if the world doesn't see you, always do the right thing. The woman dropped her suitcase with a soft thud, her face etched with frustration. "Excuse me, ma'am," Malik said, stepping forward. His voice was small, but polite. "Do you need some help?" The old woman looked up, startled. She wore large glasses that magnified her pale blue eyes. Her expression softened when she saw Malik. "Oh, well, she stammered, as if embarrassed. "Yes, young man. That's very kind of you." Malik smiled. Though the suitcase was nearly as big as he was, he tugged at it with surprising determination. After a few tense moments and a lot of grunting, he managed to get it onto the cart. "There you go," he said, wiping his brow. The woman let out a small, breathless laugh. "My goodness, you're a strong little fellow." Malik shrugged. "My mom says it's all about effort." She extended a wrinkled hand. "I'm Eleanor Westbrook. And you are?" "Malik," he replied, shaking her hand. "Malik Johnson." Eleanor smiled warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Malik Johnson. You've saved me quite a bit of trouble today." Malik's grin widened, proud of himself. Before they could speak further, his mother's voice called sharply from across the room. "Malik, where did you go?" "I gotta go," Malik said quickly, glancing back at his mother, who was now searching the crowd for him. Eleanor nodded, a wistful look on her face. "Thank you, Malik. The world needs more boys like you." Malik ran back to his mother, who scolded him for wandering off. As he plopped down beside her, his thoughts lingered on Eleanor, the old lady he'd helped, who seemed so alone. He didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness was the first page of a story that would change his life forever. The airplane's engines roared as Malik slumped into his window seat. His backpack sat on his lap, his chin resting on top of it as he gazed outside. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the clouds in streaks of orange and lavender. It was beautiful, but Malik's thoughts were still on the old woman, Eleanor Westbrook, and the way she had smiled at him earlier. "Why'd you wander off like that?" Lila Johnson's voice was stern as she stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin. "I didn't wander," Malik mumbled, twisting a zipper on his backpack. "I was helping someone." Lila paused, looking down at her son. Her expression softened just a little. "Helping who?" "There was this old lady," Malik said, his voice picking up with excitement. "She couldn't lift her bag, so I helped her get it onto her cart." Lila sighed as she sank into the seat next to him. "Malik, you have to be careful. Not everyone at an airport is safe." "She was nice," he insisted. "Her name was Eleanor." Lila didn't reply. She just patted his knee and pulled out her phone again, scrolling silently. A few rows ahead, in first class, Eleanor Westbrook sat comfortably in a wide leather seat. The flight attendant had brought her a glass of water, but she wasn't drinking it. Instead, she stared out the window, lost in thought. Her mind drifted back to the little boy, Malik Johnson. His small, sincere voice still echoed in her ears. "Do you need some help?" Eleanor couldn't remember the last time someone had approached her so willingly, without judgment, without hesitation. Airports were lonely places for her now, just as much as the sprawling mansion she returned to each night. A photo peeked out from her handbag. A young boy with curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes, laughing as he held a toy plane. She quickly tucked it away, a shadow falling across her face. "You've saved me quite a bit of trouble today." The plane landed with a soft jolt at JFK Airport. Malik yawned and rubbed his eyes as the passengers around him stood up and began gathering their bags. Lila had already nudged him awake, tugging at his hand to keep up. "Let's go. Your Uncle Daryl's waiting outside," Lila said. Malik followed her into the crowded aisle. He tried not to bump anyone as they shuffled toward the exit. Just before they reached the front, Malik spotted Eleanor Westbrook again. She sat calmly in first class, her suitcase neatly tucked beside her. Her gaze caught Malik's. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Eleanor gave him a small, almost wistful smile, a simple gesture, but one that felt like an unspoken thank you. Malik smiled back. Before he could say anything, the line pushed forward, and the connection was broken. Arifadias outside the airport, the cold New York air bit at Malik's cheeks. He stuffed his hands into his coat pockets as they waited by the curb. Cars honked, people shouted, and taxis zipped by, creating a cacophony of sound that was both exciting and overwhelming. "There's Daryl," Lila said, waving to a beat-up blue sedan that pulled up. A tall man stepped out, wearing a heavy jacket and a Yankees cap. "Lila, Malik, hop in. It's freezing out here." Malik climbed into the back seat, the warmth of the car a welcome relief. As they drove through the city, Malik stared out the window, watching skyscrapers loom above him. It was his first time in New York, and everything felt bigger, louder, and faster than Atlanta. "You okay back there, kid?" Uncle Daryl asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," Malik replied, but his thoughts drifted back to Eleanor. He wondered where she was now, probably riding in a fancy car, heading to a fancy house where everything was perfect. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor's car pulled into the long driveway of her estate. The house was enormous, gray stone with tall arched windows. But it was silent. Too silent. "Shall I prepare dinner, ma'am?" Her housekeeper, Mrs. Adler, asked as Eleanor entered the grand foyer. "No, thank you," Eleanor replied. She set her handbag on the table and shrugged off her coat, her shoulders drooping under the weight of her thoughts. In the living room, a grand fireplace crackled, filling the room with warmth. Eleanor sat in her favorite chair, staring at the flames. Her mind wandered back to the airport, to Malik, the boy with the kind eyes and the small, determined hands that had lifted her bag without hesitation. She thought about how familiar he seemed. Then her gaze drifted to a photo on the mantel, her grandson, Lucas, who she hadn't seen in years. The resemblance hit her again like a punch to the gut. "I should have done things differently," she whispered to the empty room. Days later, Malik was back home in Atlanta. Life returned to normal. School, chores, and weekends spent playing basketball at the park. The brief encounter with Eleanor began to fade from his mind. Then one evening, as Lila was cooking dinner, the phone rang. "Malik, get that," she called from the kitchen. Malik picked up the receiver. "Hello? Hello, is this Malik Johnson?" a polite voice asked. Malik frowned. Yeah, who's this? Malik, this is Eleanor Westbrook. I hope you remember me. Malik's eyes widened. Eleanor? Lila appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. Who's calling? Malik stared at the phone, stunned. It's her. The lady from the airport. Lila snatched the phone. Hello? Who is this? Eleanor's voice was calm and kind. Mrs. Johnson, my name is Eleanor Westbrook. I had the pleasure of meeting your son at the airport. He was kind enough to help me, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Lila's expression turned wary. Why are you calling? I'd like to invite you both to New York as my guests, Eleanor said. There's something very important I wish to discuss with you. Lila's eyes narrowed, suspicion flaring. Ma'am, I don't know who you are or what you want, but we're not interested in any charity. This isn't charity, Eleanor said softly. It's gratitude. Lila hesitated. Malik tugged at her sleeve, his face full of curiosity. Mom, who is it? What does she want? Lila covered the mouthpiece and whispered, She wants us to come to New York. Malik's eyes lit up. New York? Really? Lila shot him a warning look, but before she could hang up, Eleanor's voice came through again. Please, Mrs. Johnson, just hear me out. Your son's kindness meant more to me than you know. Lila stared at the phone, conflicted. Finally, she sighed. Fine, we'll think about it. As she hung up, Malik's heart raced. Eleanor Westbrook hadn't forgotten him, and something told him this was only the beginning. The trip to New York was set for the following weekend. Malik could hardly contain his excitement as he shoved clothes into his small, worn duffel bag. He didn't own much: a pair of jeans, some sweatshirts, his sneakers, and a few t-shirts. But he packed everything like it was treasure. His mother, Lila, watched him from the doorway, her arms crossed and her brow furrowed in thought. Malik, this is just a visit, she said firmly, as if to remind herself as much as him. Don't get too comfortable around that woman. Rich folks like her, they live in a different world. But she was nice, Mama, Malik replied, zipping up his bag. She said she was grateful. Grateful, Lila murmured. Well, we'll see. She had spent the past week second-guessing herself. Accepting an invitation from a wealthy stranger didn't sit well with her. Yet, something about the way Eleanor had spoken on the phone, the sincerity in her voice, had made Lila pause. People like Eleanor didn't usually go out of their way to repay kindness, especially from someone like Malik, a boy whose life couldn't have been more different from her own. By the time their plane touched down at JFK, Malik was practically bouncing in his seat. Outside the terminal, the city buzzed with energy. Taxis honked, people rushed by, and the chill of the New York winter nipped at Malik's face. A black luxury car with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, and a tall man in a sleek black coat stepped out. He wore a driver's cap and held a sign that read, Johnson Family. You're the Johnsons? He asked, his voice polite but distant. Yes, we are, Lila replied, tightening her grip on Malik's hand. Mrs. Westbrook sent me to pick you up. Welcome to New York. Malik's eyes widened as the driver opened the door to the car. The leather seats were warm and soft, and the smell, something like newness and expensive cologne, felt almost unreal. Dang, Malik whispered under his breath as he leaned back, taking it all in. This is fancy. Lila gave him a sharp look, but she couldn't hide her own awe. This was nothing like the cars she was used to driving back in Atlanta. The car wound its way through the city streets before pulling up to a gated property in the Upper East Side. The wrought iron gates opened slowly, and Malik stared wide-eyed at the mansion in front of them. It looked like something out of a movie. Tall, gray stone with grand windows and a sprawling garden now dusted with frost. This where she lives? Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The driver smiled faintly in the rear-view mirror. Yes, welcome to the Westbrook estate. Lila didn't say a word. She just held Malik's hand tightly as they stepped out of the car. The front door opened before they could knock. Eleanor Westbrook stood there, smiling warmly. She was wearing a tailored dark blue coat, her white hair pinned back neatly. She looked elegant but approachable, a woman who carried herself with grace despite her years. "Welcome," Eleanor said softly. "Lila." "Malik. It's so good to see you both." Malik grinned. "Hi, Miss Eleanor." "Hello, Malik," Eleanor replied, her eyes brightening as she looked at him. "Please, come in." Inside, the house was just as grand as it looked from the outside. Polished floors, high ceilings, and art that Malik didn't understand, but thought looked impressive. They were led to a sitting room, where a fire crackled in the marble fireplace. "Please sit," Eleanor said, gesturing to the plush chairs. Lila sat down stiffly, glancing around the room as if waiting for someone to tell her this was all a mistake. Malik, however, sank into one of the chairs and marveled at how soft it was. Eleanor sat across from them, her hands folded in her lap. For a moment, she simply studied Malik, as if trying to decide where to begin. "I wanted to thank you again, Malik," she said finally. "Your kindness at the airport meant more to me than you know." Malik shrugged. "It wasn't a big deal. You just needed help." Eleanor smiled, her expression turning bittersweet. "Sometimes, Malik, the smallest gestures carry the most weight." Lila shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Westbrook, you didn't fly us all the way here just to say thank you." "You're right," Eleanor replied gently. "I didn't." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Malik, when I met you, I was reminded of someone very dear to me. My grandson, Lucas." Her voice faltered slightly before she continued. "Lucas and we were very close once, but mistakes were made. I lost him. It's a regret I carry with me every day." Malik frowned. "What happened to him?" Eleanor's eyes softened. "Life pulled us apart. I don't want to burden you with the details. But when I saw you, Malik, when I saw your kindness, your spirit, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Hope." Malik blinked, unsure of what to say. Beside him, Lila narrowed her eyes warily. "What exactly are you saying?" Lila asked. Eleanor leaned forward. "I want to help Malik. I want to give him opportunities. Opportunities I wasn't able to give my own grandson. Malik, you're a remarkable boy. You deserve a chance to grow, to thrive, to become someone great." Malik sat up straighter. "What kind of opportunities?" Eleanor smiled. "An education. I've arranged for a full scholarship to one of the best private schools in New York. If you accept, you'll have access to the best teachers, the best resources, a future most children can only dream of." The room fell silent. Malik's heart pounded in his chest. A school in New York? It sounded like something out of a storybook. But Lila's face darkened. "Wait a minute," she said, her voice low. "You want to take my son out of Atlanta? Away from me?" Eleanor's expression softened. "He wouldn't be alone, Mrs. Johnson. He would have everything he needs, and you would be welcome to visit any time." Lila stood up abruptly. "Mrs. Westbrook, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but my son isn't a charity case. We may not have much, but we have each other." "It's not charity," Eleanor said calmly. "It's a chance for Malik to build a better life." Malik looked between the two women, his chest tight. "Mama, maybe this could be good." Lila turned to him, her eyes shining with tears. "Malik, we don't belong in this world." "But what if I can belong?" Malik whispered. Eleanor remained seated, her face calm but pleading. "Please, Mrs. Johnson, think about it. I'm offering Malik an opportunity to become everything he dreams of. Isn't that worth considering?" Lila didn't respond. She just grabbed Malik's hand and pulled him toward the door. "Come on, Malik. We're leaving." Malik followed reluctantly, his mind swirling with questions and emotions. He turned back one last time to see Eleanor sitting alone in the grand room, her shoulders slumped, her face lined with sadness. As they stepped out into the cold New York air, Malik's heart ached. He couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor's words. A chance. It sounded so simple, but somehow he knew this was just the beginning. The flight back to Atlanta was heavy with silence. Lila sat stiffly in her seat, her arms crossed, as she stared out the window. Malik, beside her, fidgeted restlessly, clutching his backpack in his lap. The events of the past day played over and over in his mind. Eleanor Westbrook's offer, her sad, pleading eyes, and his mother's sharp refusal. He couldn't understand it. Why wouldn't Mama even think about it? The plane jolted as it landed, and Lila stood up quickly, eager to get off. She barely spoke as they made their way through the terminal, down to baggage claim, and out to the car that Malik's uncle had sent. "Malik, not another word about that woman," Lila finally said, her tone making it clear the subject was closed. But it wasn't closed, not for Malik. Days passed, but Eleanor's offer haunted Malik's thoughts. Every night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining what it might be like to attend that fancy school in New York. He saw himself in a crisp uniform, walking through towering hallways with books tucked under his arm. He imagined learning things he'd never even heard of before, meeting people who dreamed big, and living a life he never thought possible. He couldn't help but feel frustrated. It wasn't fair. Didn't Mama see this was his chance? At school, Malik's grades began to slip. His teachers noticed how distracted he was, but no one understood what weighed on his mind. His best friend Jamal nudged him at lunch one day. "Yo, Malik, you good? You look like you saw a ghost." "I'm fine," Malik muttered, poking at his tray of cafeteria food. "You sure? You're acting weird lately." Malik didn't answer. How could he explain to Jamal what was going on? That someone had offered him a way out, a chance to see a world bigger than their neighborhood, their crumbling school, their limited lives. And the tension between Malik and his mother simmered. Lila could sense something was wrong, but every time she tried to talk to him, he shut down. One evening, while Malik was in his room doing homework, the phone rang. Lila picked it up in the kitchen. "Hello? Mrs. Johnson? This is Eleanor Westbrook." Lila froze. "Why are you calling me again?" "Please, Mrs. Johnson, don't hang up," Eleanor said softly. "I know you have every reason to be wary of me, but I'm asking you to reconsider. I meant what I said. Malik is special. He deserves a chance at something more." Lila's grip on the phone tightened. "And you think we don't give him enough? That just because we're not rich like you, we can't raise him right?" Eleanor's voice remained calm. "That's not what I think at all. I know you love Malik deeply. Anyone can see that. But this isn't about wealth or status. It's about opportunity." Lila sank into a chair, her anger giving way to something more painful. Doubt. "I don't need a stranger telling me what my son deserves." "I'm not trying to tell you how to raise Malik," Eleanor replied gently, "but I see so much potential in him. I don't want that potential to go unfulfilled simply because of circumstances." Lila was silent. She thought of her son's bright eyes, his questions about the world, his restless curiosity. She had always told herself that he would find his way, even if they didn't have much. But what if this woman was right? What if this was his chance? "You don't understand," Lila said finally, her voice trembling. "We've worked so hard to survive, to stick together. If I let him go, what does that mean for us?" "It doesn't mean you're losing him," Eleanor said softly. "It means you're giving him a gift, one that could change his life forever." Lila covered her face with one hand, her chest tight. "I need time to think." "Of course," Eleanor replied. "Take all the time you need. I just hope you'll consider what's best for Malik, even if it's hard." The line clicked, and Lila hung up the phone. She sat there in the kitchen, staring at nothing. They see. That night, Lila knocked on Malik's bedroom door. "Come in," Malik said, his voice dull. Lila walked in and sat on the edge of his bed. Malik was curled up under his blanket, his notebook abandoned on the floor. "Malik," she began softly, "I need to ask you something." "What? Do you want to go to that school?" Malik sat up, his eyes wide with surprise. "You're asking me?" "Yes," Lila said quietly. "I need to know what you want." Malik hesitated. Part of him was afraid to say it out loud, afraid it would hurt his mother's feelings. But he couldn't lie. "Not about this." "I do, Mama," he whispered. "I want to go. I want to see what else is out there." Lila's heart ached. She had always taught Malik to dream, but now that those dreams had a chance to come true, it felt like losing him. She brushed her hand over his hair and pulled him into a hug. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll try it, but only because I love you, and I want you to be everything you're meant to be." Malik hugged her tightly, tears springing to his eyes. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "No matter where you go, you'll always be mine." The next morning, Lila called Eleanor. "We'll do it," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "But if he's unhappy, if anything goes wrong, I'm bringing him back." Eleanor's voice was full of relief. "I understand, Mrs. Johnson. Thank you for trusting me." "I'm not doing this for you," Lila replied sharply. "I'm doing it for Malik." "Of course," Eleanor said softly, "for Malik." The following week was a blur. Eleanor arranged everything: plane tickets, school paperwork, and a dormitory at the private school in New York. Lila packed Malik's things carefully, even though it broke her heart. At the airport, Malik clung to his mother as tears slid down her cheeks. "You listen to your teachers, you work hard, and you don't forget where you come from," she said firmly. "I won't, Mama. I promise." "And call me every day," she added, wiping his tears. "I mean it, Malik." "I will," he said, hugging her again. Lila stepped back, her eyes searching his face. "You go make me proud, baby. I'll be right here, cheering for you." Malik nodded, his small shoulders squared with determination. "I will, Mama. I promise." As he walked toward the gate, he turned back one last time to see his mother waving. The sadness in her eyes cut deep, but there was something else there, too: pride. Malik took a deep breath and stepped onto the plane, ready for the unknown. Adrenaline dumb far away, in her grand home, Eleanor sat by the fire with a small smile. Malik Johnson was on his way to a new beginning, a beginning she hoped would lead to something extraordinary. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt hope. The private school in New York was nothing like Malik had ever seen before. The campus felt more like a small university than a grade school, with towering brick buildings, manicured lawns, and students dressed in pristine uniforms. Everyone seemed to walk with purpose, their backpacks neatly slung over their shoulders, as if they carried the future inside them. Malik felt out of place the moment he stepped foot on the grounds. His uniform, a crisp navy blazer, white shirt, and a tie he still didn't know how to knot properly, felt stiff and foreign. The other kids, with their polished shoes and confident smiles, looked like they had always belonged here. Malik, with his southern drawl and hand-me-down sneakers, wasn't so sure he did. The first day was the hardest. Malik was assigned a room in the school's dormitory, a small but tidy space with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a window overlooking the courtyard. His roommate, Dylan Carter, was a wiry boy with slicked-back blonde hair and a sharp, suspicious gaze. "So, where are you from?" Dylan asked, barely glancing up from his phone. "Atlanta," Malik replied, setting his backpack down on his bed. "Atlanta?" Dylan snorted. What are you doing here? People like you don't usually get into St. James Prep. Malik froze. What do you mean, people like me? You know what I mean, Dylan said dismissively. Whatever. Just don't touch my stuff, and we'll be fine. Malik clenched his fists, biting back a reply. He'd dealt with kids like Dylan before, kids who thought they were better than him. He wasn't about to let anyone make him feel small, no matter how fancy the school was. The classes were overwhelming. The teachers spoke quickly, the material was challenging, and Malik found himself scrambling to keep up. In math class, he stared at the board in confusion as the teacher scribbled complex equations he didn't understand. Having trouble? A soft voice whispered beside him. Malik turned to see a girl with curly brown hair and kind green eyes. She smiled at him, a hint of understanding in her expression. I'm Emma Davis, she said, holding out her hand. You're Malik, right? Yeah, he said, shaking her hand shyly. Don't worry, Emma said. It takes a while to get used to the classes here. If you need help, I can show you the ropes. Malik's shoulders relaxed for the first time all day. Thanks. That evening, Malik sat alone in the library, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, trying to catch up on his assignments. The numbers and words blurred together, his head pounding with frustration. Struggling, huh? Malik looked up to see Eleanor Westbrook standing in the doorway, her coat draped over her arm. Miss Eleanor? He asked, surprised. She smiled and walked over, sitting down across from him. How was your first day? Malik shrugged. It's hard. Eleanor nodded knowingly. New beginnings often are. Malik looked down at his open math book. I don't belong here, he muttered. Everyone else is so much smarter than me, and they talk like I'm not supposed to be here. Malik, Eleanor said gently, you do belong here. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. But it's not just the schoolwork, Malik said, his voice cracking. It's everything, the way they look at me, like I don't deserve to sit next to them. Eleanor's face softened with both understanding and sadness. I know exactly how you feel. Malik frowned. How could you? Eleanor sighed, folding her hands together on the table. I didn't always have the life you see now, Malik. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the daughter of a factory worker. My family had nothing. When I was your age, I won a scholarship to a private school just like this one. I thought it would change my life, and it did. But it wasn't easy. The other children looked at me the way they're looking at you now. Malik stared at her, shocked. You mean you weren't rich? No, Eleanor said softly. I worked for everything I have, and I made mistakes along the way, mistakes that cost me the people I loved. What happened? Malik asked quietly. Eleanor hesitated, as though choosing her words carefully. My grandson, Lucas. He grew up with everything money could buy. I thought I was giving him the best life possible, but I didn't realize how much he needed me. I let my ambition, my pride, come between us. I pushed him too hard, and I lost him. Malik looked down at his notebook, her words weighing heavily on him. Malik, Eleanor continued, I see in you what I saw in Lucas when he was your age. Potential, kindness, and a spark that can't be taught. I failed Lucas, but I don't want to fail you. Malik swallowed the lump in his throat. Why me? Because you helped me when no one else did, Eleanor replied. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't expect anything in return. That kind of kindness is rare, Malik. I want to give you every opportunity to succeed, not because you owe me, but because you deserve it. Malik nodded slowly, his heart pounding. For the first time since arriving at the school, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could do this. Eleanor stood and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You'll find your place here, Malik. I believe in you, but you must believe in yourself. Over the next few weeks, Malik threw himself into his studies. He stayed up late every night, working through problems he didn't understand and reading books that felt like they were written in another language. Emma Davis kept her word, helping him study after class and showing him tricks to stay organized. Slowly, Malik began to catch up. His grades improved, and his teachers began to take notice. Even Dylan, his roommate, seemed to grudgingly acknowledge him. "You're smarter than you look, Johnson," Dylan said one evening, tossing a basketball in the air as he lay on his bed. Malik smirked. "Thanks, I guess." Every Sunday, Malik called his mother. Lila listened carefully as he told her about his classes, his new friends, and the challenges he faced. "You're working hard, right?" she asked every time. "Yes, Mama," Malik replied. "I'm doing my best." "I'm proud of you, baby," she said, though her voice always sounded distant, like the miles between them weighed on her. "Just don't forget where you come from." "I won't," Malik promised, and he meant it. One evening, as Malik was finishing his homework, a letter arrived for him. The school secretary handed it to him with a smile. "This is for you, Malik." He tore open the envelope and stared at the paper inside. It was a handwritten note from Eleanor. "Dear Malik, you're doing better than you know. I'm proud of you. Keep going. Great things await. Yours, Eleanor." Malik held the letter in his hands, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in a long time, he believed those words. He could do this. And he wasn't alone. The weeks turned into months, and winter gave way to spring in New York. The snow melted, revealing the sprawling green lawns of St. James Prep, and the heavy coats were replaced with blazers and light sweaters. Malik's life had settled into a rhythm. Each morning, he woke before sunrise to review his lessons. Classes were still demanding, but he wasn't drowning anymore. He found his stride, raising his hand in class, earning nods of approval from his teachers, and surprising everyone, himself included, with the answers he knew. But success, Malik was beginning to learn, came with its own challenges. It started in history class. "Malik, can you tell us about the Reconstruction period and its impact on the Southern economy?" Mr. Gardner asked one afternoon. Malik cleared his throat. After the Civil War, Reconstruction was supposed to rebuild the South, but it didn't really work out for freed slaves. Sharecropping and stuff kept people in poverty. They were free, but not really free, if that makes sense. Mr. Gardner smiled. "Very good, Malik. That's a thoughtful response." Malik felt a small swell of pride, but the moment didn't last. As soon as class ended, Dylan Carter was waiting for him in the hallway, leaning casually against the lockers. "Nice speech back there, Johnson," Dylan said, a mocking edge to his voice. Malik ignored him and kept walking, clutching his books tightly. "You think you're smart, huh?" Dylan continued, falling into step beside him. "Just because Mrs. Westbrook paid for you to be here doesn't mean you belong. Everyone knows you're her little charity project." Malik stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Dylan smirked. "My dad says people like you only get handouts because folks feel sorry for you. Admit it, you wouldn't be here if it weren't for her." Malik's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to yell, to fight, to prove Dylan wrong. But deep down, the words stung because part of him wondered if they were true. That evening, Malik sat alone in his dorm room, staring at the math homework in front of him, but seeing nothing. Dylan's words echoed in his head. "You wouldn't be here if it weren't for her." Was that true? Did he really belong at St. James Prep? Or was he just a charity case, someone Eleanor had chosen out of pity? He picked up the letter Eleanor had sent him weeks ago, the one where she'd written how proud she was. He read it over and over, searching for answers he couldn't find. A week later, the school announced a public speaking competition, a prestigious event where the best students would give speeches on topics of their choice. The winner would earn a scholarship to a summer leadership program at a top university. Malik knew what it meant. Winning would prove he deserved to be at St. James Prep. Winning would silence every voice, including his own doubts. When Malik signed up for the competition, word spread quickly. "You're gonna embarrass yourself, Johnson," Dylan sneered. "You think you can compete against us?" Malik didn't answer. He just tightened his jaw and kept walking. Malik spent the next few weeks preparing for the speech. He worked late into the night, writing, rewriting, and practicing in front of a mirror. Emma Davis offered to help, sitting with him in the library and listening patiently. "What's your speech about?" Emma asked one evening as Malik shuffled through his note cards. Malik looked up, his expression serious. "It's about what it means to be given a chance, and what you do with it." Emma smiled. "That's powerful, Malik. You're going to do great." But as the day of the competition approached, Malik's nerves got the better of him. He called his mother the night before, his voice shaking. "I don't know if I can do this, Mama," he admitted. "What if they laugh at me?" Lila's voice was calm and steady. "Malik, do you remember what I told you when you left for New York?" "Yeah," Malik whispered. "You said to work hard and not forget where I come from." "And I meant it," Lila said. "You've worked so hard, baby. You earned your place there. You don't need to prove anything to those kids. You just need to prove it to yourself. Go out there and be proud of who you are." Malik swallowed hard, tears stinging his eyes. "I'll try, Mama." "You won't try. You'll do it," Lila said firmly. "I know you will." The day of the competition arrived. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as students, teachers, and parents filled the seats. Malik sat backstage, clutching his note cards, his heart racing. "Next up, Malik Johnson," the announcer called. Malik took a deep breath and walked out onto the stage. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but he knew they were all watching him. For a moment, his mind went blank. The silence stretched, and whispers rippled through the crowd. "You don't belong here." The thought hit him hard, but then, somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard his mother's voice. "You earned your place." Malik looked up and began to speak. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "My name is Malik Johnson, and I'm here to talk about what it means to be given a chance." He paused, scanning the audience. Sometimes life doesn't give everyone the same start. Some people are born with advantages, money, connections, opportunities, and some people aren't. But a chance can change everything. He spoke about his mother, about how she worked tirelessly to give him the best life she could. He talked about Eleanor Westbrook, about how her kindness gave him a chance he never thought he'd have. "But it's not just about being given a chance," Malik continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's about what you do with it. It's about proving to yourself, and no one else, that you are worthy, that you are capable, that you belong." The auditorium was silent when he finished. Malik stood there, his heart pounding, waiting for the reaction. Then, the applause started. Soft at first, then louder and louder, until the entire room was clapping. Malik looked out into the crowd and saw Eleanor standing near the back, her hands together, tears in her eyes. In that moment, Malik knew he had done it. He had proved to himself, and to everyone else, that he deserved to be there. That evening, Eleanor found Malik sitting on a bench outside the auditorium, staring up at the sky. "You were wonderful today," she said softly, sitting down beside him. "Thanks," Malik replied, smiling faintly. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. "Malik, I hope you know now that you do belong here. Not because of me, but because of you. Because of your hard work, your kindness, and your determination." Malik nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "I know. I think, I finally believe it. Eleanor smiled, her face lit with pride. Good, because this is just the beginning for you. That night, Malik called his mother. I did it, Mama, he said, his voice full of joy. I gave the speech and they clapped for me. I think I won. Lila's voice trembled with emotion. I knew you would, baby. I knew it. As Malik hung up the phone and lay back in his bed, he realized something. Dylan, the doubts, the whispers, they didn't matter anymore. He had earned his place, and no one could take that away from him. The morning after the competition, the results were posted on the large bulletin board outside the auditorium. Students crowded around, jostling for a glimpse of the winners. Malik hung back, his heart pounding. Come on, Malik, Emma called, waving him forward. You've got to look. Malik swallowed hard, clutching the strap of his backpack as he stepped through the crowd. He scanned the list quickly, his breath catching in his throat when he saw his name. First place, Malik Johnson. For a moment the world seemed to freeze. Malik stared at the board, unable to believe it. He had done it. He had won. Emma grabbed his arm, grinning. You did it, Malik! You're going to the leadership program. Malik grinned back, a wave of pride and relief washing over him. For the first time since arriving at St. James Prep, he felt like he truly belonged. Word spread quickly about Malik's victory. Teachers congratulated him in the hallways, and some of his classmates, even those who had once ignored him, gave him nods of respect, but not everyone was happy. That speech was a fluke, Dylan muttered one afternoon as he shoved his books into his locker. You got lucky. Malik turned to face him, his voice calm. It wasn't luck, Dylan. I worked for it. Dylan scoffed. Whatever. You're still just Westbrook's charity case. Malik didn't let the words sting this time. He had proven himself, and no amount of jealousy could take that away. A week later, Eleanor invited Malik to her home for dinner to celebrate his win. When the driver picked him up and dropped him off at the grand estate, Malik felt more at ease than he had the first time he'd been there. Eleanor greeted him warmly at the door, her face glowing with pride. Malik, congratulations again. I knew you could do it. Thank you, Miss Eleanor, Malik said, smiling, as she led him into the dining room. The table was set with fine china and silverware that gleamed under the chandelier's light. Malik sat across from Eleanor as her housekeeper served roast chicken and vegetables. This program will be a wonderful opportunity for you, Eleanor said as they ate. It's a chance to meet people, to learn leadership skills, and to prepare for the future. Malik nodded. I'm excited, but… He hesitated, setting his fork down. It's just… my mom. Eleanor tilted her head. What about her? Malik looked down at his plate. I don't know if she's okay with all this. She's proud of me, but I think she feels like I'm leaving her behind. Eleanor's face softened. I understand, Maliki. Your mother has worked hard to raise you on her own. It's not easy to let go. She says she's fine, Malik said quietly, but when I call her, I can tell she's lonely. Eleanor reached across the table and placed a hand on Malik's. Your mother loves you, Malik. Everything she's done has been for you. And sometimes, the people we love make sacrifices so we can grow. Malik swallowed hard, her words sinking in. I just don't want to let her down. You won't, Eleanor said gently. But you must remember, this is your life. You have to honor the sacrifices your mother made by making the most of the opportunities you've been given. The leadership program was held at a prestigious university in Connecticut over the summer. Malik was one of only a handful of middle school students selected, and the experience was like nothing he had ever imagined. He attended workshops on leadership, team building, and public speaking. He met students from all over the country, kids who dreamed of becoming scientists, politicians, and CEOs. For the first time, Malik began to see a future beyond what he had known back in Atlanta. But as much as he thrived, Malik couldn't shake the ache in his chest. Late at night, after his roommates had fallen asleep, he would stare at the ceiling and think of his mother, alone in their small apartment. One evening, after a particularly inspiring lecture, Malik sat outside under a clear, starry sky and called his mother. "Hey, Mama," he said softly. "Malik." Lila's voice lit up. "How's my baby doing?" "I'm good," Malik replied. "I'm learning a lot. It's really amazing here." "I'm so proud of you," Lila said, though Malik could hear the loneliness in her voice. "You're doing things I never even dreamed of." Malik's throat tightened. "Mama, are you okay? You don't sound okay." Lila paused. "I'm fine, baby. Don't you worry about me. This is your time to shine." "I miss you," Malik whispered. "I miss you too," Lila replied, her voice breaking just slightly. "But I'm always with you, Malik, every step of the way." When the program ended, Malik returned to New York feeling older, as though he had grown years in just a few short months. Eleanor picked him up from the airport, smiling warmly as he climbed into the car. "How was it?" she asked. "It was amazing," Malik said, his voice full of wonder. "I learned so much. I met so many smart people. He paused, looking out the window. "I want to go to college one day, Miss Eleanor. A big one. Like that." Eleanor's smile widened. "And you will, Malik. I know you will." Back at St. James Prep, Malik threw himself into his studies with renewed determination. He set his sights high, earning top marks in his classes and the respect of his teachers. Even Dylan, who once mocked him, began to treat him with grudging respect. But as Malik succeeded, the distance between him and his mother seemed to grow. Their phone calls were shorter now, and whenever Malik spoke about his achievements, he could hear the pride in her voice, but also something else, a sadness he couldn't name. One evening, Eleanor found him sitting in the library, staring at his open notebook. "What's wrong, Malik?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Malik sighed. "I'm doing everything you said I could do, but it doesn't feel right. My mom, I think I'm hurting her. She's proud of me, but she's lonely, and I don't know how to fix it." Eleanor's expression grew solemn. "Malik, the people we love sometimes make sacrifices we don't understand right away. Your mother gave you her blessing to come here because she believed in you. But it's not easy to watch someone you love grow beyond the life you shared." Malik looked at her, his eyes full of questions. "How do I make it up to her?" "You succeed," Eleanor said firmly. "You honor her sacrifices by becoming everything she dreamed you could be. And when you can, you give back, not just to her, but to others like you. That's how you repay love." Malik nodded slowly, her words sinking deep into his heart. That night, Malik called his mother. "Mama, I know it's hard me being here," he said quietly, "but I'm doing this for us, for you. I want to make you proud." Lila's voice was soft, but strong. "You already make me proud, Maliki. Just don't forget me when you get to the top, okay?" "Never," Malik promised. And he meant it. Years passed like pages turning in a book. Malik's journey through St. James Prep had been one of transformation. From a wide-eyed boy with doubts and fears, he had become a confident, brilliant young man. His success had grown beyond anyone's expectations, except perhaps his mother's and Eleanor Westbrook's. At 18 years old, Malik stood tall, wearing the navy cap and gown of St. James Prep's graduating class. The sun bathed the field in golden light, and the school grounds, where he had once felt so out of place, now felt like home. Malik had been selected to deliver the graduation speech, an honor reserved for the top student in the class. Sitting in the front row, Eleanor Westbrook watched proudly, a faint smile on her face. Beside her sat Lila Johnson, her hands clasped tightly, tears already shining in her eyes. When Malik stepped up to the podium, the crowd fell silent. "Good morning, everyone," Malik began, his voice steady and strong. "My name is Malik Johnson, and I am honored to stand before you today." He paused, looking out over the sea of faces, students, families, teachers, people who had been part of his journey. Years ago, when I first came to St. James Prep, I didn't think I belonged here. I was just a kid from Atlanta, from a family with love but not much else. I didn't know what this world had to offer, and I wasn't sure if it had room for someone like me. But someone gave me a chance to learn, to grow, and to prove to myself that I belonged. That person was Eleanor Westbrook, who I'll forever be grateful to. And that chance, no matter how small it seemed at first, set off a chain of events that changed my life. Malik's gaze shifted to his mother, who sat frozen, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "But the first person who ever believed in me was my mama," Malik said, his voice softening. "She gave me everything she had. She worked long hours, stayed up late helping me with homework, and never let me forget that I could be something. This diploma I'm earning today isn't just for me, it's for her. It's for every parent, every family, every person who sacrifices so someone they love can have a better future." The crowd erupted in applause, but Malik wasn't done. "And now, as I leave St. James Prep, I realize something important. When someone gives you a chance, you can't just take it and walk away. You have to give back. You have to become the person who creates chances for others. That's how we build a better world, one act of kindness at a time." He smiled, lifting his cap slightly as he looked out at his mother and Eleanor. "Thank you. To my mama, to Miss Eleanor, and to all the teachers and friends who believed in me. Thank you for showing me who I could be." The applause thundered as Malik stepped down from the podium. His heart felt light, as though he had finally said everything he needed to say. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled onto the lawn, families hugging and snapping pictures. Malik spotted his mother first. Lila stood with Eleanor, holding a tissue to her face as she tried to stop crying. "You did it, baby," Lila said, pulling Malik into a tight hug. "You made it." "I couldn't have done it without you, Mama," Malik said, his voice thick with emotion. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes bright with tears. "You were wonderful, Malik. I knew you would make us proud." Malik hugged her too, gently this time, aware of her frailty. Over the years, Eleanor had grown older, her hair whiter, her steps slower. But her spirit, her strength, remained as powerful as ever. "I owe you everything," Malik said softly. "No," Eleanor replied, shaking her head. "You owe me nothing. I only gave you the tools. You did the work." Malik smiled. "Then I'm going to do for others what you did for me." Eleanor's face lit up with pride. "That's all I could ever hope for." A year later, Eleanor Westbrook passed away peacefully in her home. Her funeral was small but elegant, attended by those whose lives she had touched. Malik stood at the podium in the quiet chapel, wearing a black suit and tie. He looked out at the crowd, his voice steady but emotional as he spoke. "Miss Eleanor changed my life. She gave me a chance when no one else did. But more than that, she taught me what it means to give back, to believe in someone, to lift them up, and to create opportunities that last far beyond our own lives." Malik paused, looking down at the casket draped in white lilies. "I will carry her lessons with me for the rest of my life, and I will make sure her kindness doesn't end with me." Several years later, Malik, now a successful young man, a college graduate, and a budding entrepreneur, founded the Eleanor Westbrook Foundation. The organization provided scholarships, mentorship, and opportunities to children from underserved communities. helping them access education and resources they otherwise wouldn't have had. The foundation's logo was simple, a single ripple spreading across the water. It only takes one act of kindness to create a ripple that changes lives, Malik said at the foundation's opening ceremony. I was that ripple once, and now it's my turn to help others. Lila stood proudly in the front row, her eyes shining as she watched her son speak to the crowd. When the ceremony ended, a young boy, no older than 10, approached Malik nervously. "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson," the boy said. "My name is Andre. I just wanted to say thank you. My mom says I'm getting a scholarship from your foundation. She says this is going to change everything." Malik smiled, kneeling so he was eye level with the boy. "You're welcome, Andre, but remember, you're the one who's going to change everything. Work hard, be kind, and don't ever stop believing in yourself." Andre grinned. "I won't. I promise." As Malik stood up, he looked out over the crowd of families, children, and teachers, people who had come together because of a single act of kindness so many years ago. In his heart, he whispered a silent thank you to Eleanor Westbrook. Her ripple had changed his life. And now, it was changing the world.